Welcome to another edition of the Mainly Hoops podcast, where we will break down our conference predictions for each of the power conferences today. For those of you listening on Spotify, you're missing the nice new merchandise that I have on, aren't they, Cody?
Looks great.
Anyway, we hope you guys enjoyed the first show and are looking forward to building on it. Today we're going to start in the ACC, jump right into it. Cody, why don't you take it away with that one?
Yep. And we'll start with our regular season champ is going to be the Duke Blue Devils. I think they're pretty far and away the number one team in this conference over Carolina or Wake Forest, whichever one you prefer. And it's mostly because the defense is ready to be great right away, led by Cooper Flagg, Malik Brown, and Cayman Maliwatch. They're all elite rim protectors, especially Flagg for being a small forward. He's just a great rim protector. And the perimeter D is also really good with Proctor, Zion James, who we talked about, who's super underrated, and Caleb Foster's also a pretty underrated defender at 6'5", 6'4". The offense looks to be a little bit behind. It's still really good, and shooting was like kind of the main issue with this offense coming in. But the emergence of freshman Con Knipple, who everyone loves right now, he's super hyped up. People are calling him the second coming of Reed Shepherd. I'm not sure how much I buy into it. He's an elite movement shooter, but he's not quite Reed Shepherd. I don't think he's a top 3 pick in the NBA draft, but still a great player. And Proctor and Flagg still need to be the alphas of this offense. I'm not sure if it happens right away, but I think once conference play starts, they're going to hit their stride. And I just think, there's not much else to say, but this team is just more talented than every other team in this conference. The ACC is pretty down. There's not really many flyers you can take on the bottom half of the conference or even the middle of the pack. So that kind of leads me to take Duke.
Yeah, I'm right with you. Duke's definitely the best team in this conference, and Carolina's there. Wake Forest should be better, but they're not on the same level as Duke, at least at this point, from what I've seen.
Yeah, and Carolina definitely has their concerns on both ends of the floor. You lose Baycott, and there's not a ton of weapons or proven weapons outside RJ Davis, who actually will segue into the year. Actually, the numbers are probably going to be too much to ignore. He averaged 21 last year. Wouldn't be surprised if he got to a higher number. Just with Baycott leaving, they're going to have to be more perimeter centric. Obviously, I do like Jalen Washington. We talked about in the last pod, but he's not Baycott physically. He's not going to do the things that he does on the offensive glass. And yeah, like I said, the stats are going to be too much to ignore with this guy. Even if they do finish below expectation, they finished third in this conference. Like, he's probably still going to win the award, getting the 22, 23 points a game.
Yeah, I agree. RJ Davis, I have him, and as we'll get into later, as a first-team All-American. But I think this award can't go without mentioning Hunter Salas. His breakout last year, after a tough couple of seasons at Gonzaga. Last year he really broke out onto the scene at Wake Forest, and he's probably going to be a first-team all-conference guy in the ACC this year, and probably, if Wake Forest hits their ceiling, can also be in the conversation for this award.
Absolutely. And yeah, he definitely has an outside chance to win this thing. Yeah, they get the second place. A lot of things go bad for Duke. Maybe Wake wins it. I do like this team quite a bit. I like what Forbes did. And Forbes is my coach of the year in this conference. Just, it's more of like, it's more of a bold take than anything. But like, I don't know if they're going to give it to Shire if Duke wins the conference by one game. Like, they're going to have to win it like convincingly, like almost go undefeated, go like, I think they play 20 games. They go 18-2, 19-1, which like they absolutely can do. But I'm going to take a flyer on Forbes because I love what he did. I love what he changed with the program. Adding Trevon Spillers and Omaha Ballou is exactly what they needed at the 4. Obviously they lost Carr. They lost a lot of offense there, but the defense and the added rim protection with Efton Reed is going to be huge for them.
Yeah, no doubt. Now, a couple other teams before you get into your ACC first team predictions that I wanted to touch on. The first one being Notre Dame. Micah Shrewsbury, one of my favorite coaches. If I were buying stock in a college basketball team, I know we've had this conversation. huge fan of what he's doing at Notre Dame. Just got a 5-star recruit for next year's class. You know, he's really doing a good job up there. Got some continuity there with guards like Marcus Burton and his son Braden Shrewsbury. You know, so I think Notre Dame, while they're still not going to be at the top half of the conference this year, I think they're definitely trending in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think they could get close to the top half. I could see them finishing 8th. I think that's a pretty optimistic finish for them. Adding Matt Alaco too from Princeton is big time. Good movement shooter. They needed an extra guy. They needed more scoring depth. And Marcus Burton's actually on my first team, along with RJ Davis, Player of the Year, obviously Hunter Salas. We talked about. I have Nigel Pack on the first team, and Cooper Flag is on the first team as well. I was surprised that I put a guy like Pack on there, but I don't think there's a ton of depth with the talent in this conference. So that's just who I ended up going with by default, honestly. I mean, I think he's a great player. Obviously, he's a great shooter, but
last year dealt obviously with a bunch of injuries, right? He missed some time. So, you know, he should be back to being that electrifying player that he can be. Final team before we move to the SEC. They obviously had some news today, the Virginia Cavaliers, and we were very down on them even before any of the Tony Bennett news where he stepped down. And then today where Jalen Warley just entered the transfer portal 6 days before their tip-off. So that program just feels like it's in disarray. Not really sure where they're headed at this point, and it looks like it's going to be quite a struggle of a season for them.
Exactly. I mean, Warley was kind of everything you wanted in a Virginia defender. Like, he's like the optimal Reese Beekman replacement there. Yeah. So the defense is going to take a hit. I mean, especially with Bennett and the system kind of just going away with him, the pack line defense. I think it'll stay because Coach Sanchez is a Bennett disciple. He was an assistant coach for a while, went to Charlotte and came back. But honestly, I think the offense kind of gets modernized a little bit. Like, running more ball screens is like the biggest thing, is that optimizes what Data Ames does so well. And I have him as like one of my breakout players in this conference, but the shooting isn't really there. And like the Charlotte offenses when Sanchez was there were predicated off shooting as well. But I do think the offense gets a little more modernized and actually could be better than last year.
Yep.
Defense is a problem though, obviously.
Yeah. So anyway, moving on. That's the ACC. SEC. For me, this seemed kind of like an easy conference. A lot of chalk. Really, I didn't make any bold takes. I have Alabama winning the conference. I think this is just purely based on them having, who we'll talk about a bit later, the player who I think is going to win the Wooden Award this year, a first-team All-American, Mark Sears, right? He's back for his 5th year. Really electric guard, carried them to the Final Four last year. But they really did a great job bringing in an experienced group. They're going to start 5 fifth-year guys this year once they hit conference play, because Chris Youngblood, he's out till conference play. But they brought in Grant Nelson, obviously, last year. But then they got Cliff Amourier, who's now holding down the back line of that defense. Going to be a great rim protector, lob threat for them. Chris Youngblood, who we just mentioned, came over from South Florida. And then they got Aiden Holloway, who's projected to come off the bench. 5-star recruit who went to Auburn last year, made a bit of a surprising move transferring to Alabama. But he didn't have a great year, obviously, but the potential's certainly there. And it feels like Nate Oates might be the coach that can draw that out of him. And he's not going to be asked to do a ton right away, where they're going to have Sears kind of spearheading that offense, right? So with Sears, Grant Nelson, Amourier, and then Youngblood and Latrell Wrightsell in the starting lineup, like, that's a ton of experience, good shooting, good rim protection. It feels like this team really has the makeup to make another deep run just like they did last year. That's not discrediting any of the other teams in the SEC. Like, this conference is going to be very competitive. And there's going to be some teams that can really give Alabama a run for their money, like Auburn, like Tennessee, Kentucky's going to hang around, I think, for a bit. Arkansas, if they hit their potential. But for me at this point, the consensus favorite and the chalky pick is the one I'm taking, and that's Alabama.
For sure. And yeah, the biggest reason is from Cliff Amore, the way he defends. I mean, the rim protection is absolutely what you need in the Nate Oates system. They're trying to run guys off the 3-point line, filter teams to the rim and to the mid-range area. And you couldn't find a better one in the portal than Cliff Amore. So that's big time. And they have so many depth options. I mean, they also have some wing defenders that I actually kind of like in Fillin. And you have Sherelle, who can play the 4, maybe guard some wing guys. So that's going to be huge for them. I mean, the perimeter defense as a whole is going to be still a weakness, I think, but the defense is going to be miles ahead of where it was. But I mean, I actually didn't pick Alabama to win. I actually picked Auburn just because I think they have the highest floor in the conference. I think the defense is still the best in the conference. Chad Baker-Mazara and Janai Broome are elite defenders. They also have some other defenders on the wing, like Chaney Johnson. It's going to replace Jalen Williams, who's a far better defender. And yeah, it's kind of just more of a flaw. I like JP Pegues as well. I think he's the most solid guard that they've had in the last few years. Obviously, the guard play was a little bit shaky. That problem left with KD Johnson going to George Mason.
Yeah.
So honestly, I think
good spot for him.
Absolutely, he might actually be pretty good there. But I think the floor is super high, and I think this is a way more experienced team, a way more disciplined team than it has been in the past. And the balance is going to be there with this group.
Yeah. I think one of the drawbacks with Alabama is they did lose some guys this year. They lost Aaron Estrada. They lost Rylan Griffin, who transferred to Kansas. Both those guys were steadying forces, especially on the offensive end. Griffin got very hot in the tournament last season. So that may make them take a hit because there's not that continuity there right away anyway. Because they brought in 4 transfers that are at least 4 transfers that are going to play for them. So, we'll see. But as I mentioned, I just think Mark Sears is too good, and that's why I picked him to be also my conference player of the year. I think this pick, it was really just him or Janai Broome probably. And for me, I think Alabama's going to win the conference. But I could see a world where Broome does win it. Auburn could definitely win the conference, but Sears is just too experienced, elite scorer, shooter, right? He just does it all for them, really carries the load. So I don't really see a world where Sears doesn't win this award unless he gets injured or if Alabama really lays an egg.
Yeah, I mean, I think he could win it even if they are below expectation. The guy might average 25 a game this year. He's going to play. I mean, he played a lot of point guard last year, but when you lose Estrada, who loves to have the ball in his hands and make plays for others, Sears is going to have to do that now. They think Holloway is going to be that guy, but I think he's more of an off-ball guard here, and he might honestly get his way filtered out to play 15 to 20 minutes a game. And a guy like Houston Millette comes in. I believe he was at Pepperdine.
Yeah.
And he's a really good ball guard as well. Yeah. But I do think they're going to trust Sears to handle some playmaking duties as well. And his usage rate's going to skyrocket. And he might average 25 and 5 this year.
Yeah, it's going to have to because his assist numbers were not high, right? He only averaged a couple assists a game, if I remember right. So nothing crazy there, but they're going to ask him to do a lot more. But as for my coach of the year, you're going to notice a trend. I also picked Nate Oates to win coach of the year. And I think this is just a testament to the program that he's built there and the players that he's brought in, all the experience, but also bringing in a guy like Aiden Holloway and keeping Sears there, in this transfer portal, crazy basketball world that we live in now. It's like Sears could have jumped ship and gone to Duke, after having a good year or two or gone to another big school, but he stayed there at Alabama and they've built something there. Big Final Four run last year. So for me, it's more about the culture that they've built and the success I expect them to have this year with such an experienced team. I think Nate Oates is likely to win it, but I could also see a guy like Bruce Pearl winning it at Auburn if they win the conference. Right, there are a lot of good coaches in this conference right now.
Yeah, I went in a different direction. I'm loaded with bold takes today, but I took Mark Pope to win it. I think in year one, if they can finish top 3 or top 4 and get within a game or two of winning the conference regular season, I think they have to give it to him. Like Coach Cal leaves and you still recruit the way that he did. I think it just goes to show how good of a coach he is and how good of a recruiter he is. But yeah, I mean, I think the shooting is going to be fantastic there as well. And yeah, I mean, a lot of first year coaches tend to win like these awards, like if they exceed expectation in year one. And I do think this is what we have with Kentucky. I personally think they finished top 4. I'm a little bit down on Tennessee as well. So I can see a world where they finish top 3.
Yeah. So speaking of first year head coaches, I also wanted to throw out an honorable mention for a team that I've really grown on, or that's really grown on me, and that's Mark Byington at Vanderbilt. Really like what he did in the portal, as we talked about in the last episode. Don't expect him to win this award because I don't think Vanderbilt's going to be good enough. But there is a world where Vanderbilt finishes maybe in that top half, and they give it to him. But I doubt it, like I said. But I like what he's done there, so I'm going to give him some praise.
I mean, if they get the top half, like he's got to be at least the top 1 or 2 candidate to win it, right? I mean, with that program, completely flipping that program from what Stackhouse left it with. I mean,
right? Yeah,
they have to give it to him if they're top half. I don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I
still think
certainly don't.
Maybe we talk about the SEC is loaded.
Yeah, I certainly don't expect it, but I think Byington deserves his flowers for what he's brought in there for his first year at Vanderbilt.
For sure.
So, SEC first team for me, Mark Sears, as we've talked about, Janai Broom, Zakai Ziegler I threw in there, guard at Tennessee, Walter Clayton Jr. at Florida, and Wade Taylor at Texas A&M. And then I threw a couple honorable mentions on there as well, Grant Nelson and John L. Davis at Alabama and Arkansas, respectively.
Yeah, those would be the guys I would have in there as well. Maybe replacing Ziegler with Davis, and that would probably be the only thing that I do.
Yep. Yeah, that was one of the players that I was on the fence about. But just I want to see it from Davis at Arkansas. So, I think I know what I'm going to get in Ziegler, so that's why I went that direction. But I definitely would not be shocked at all if Ziegler wasn't on there and Davis was.
Yeah, I mean, Ziegler's an incredible defender, one of the best point of attack defenders in the country. It's just the offensive limitations he has off the dribble, but
for sure,
he's a great player.
Yeah. So, moving on, we have the Big 12 up next. Cody, I know you took a deep dive in. This is one of your favorite conferences, one of your favorite teams. And I'll let you kick it off with them.
Yeah, I think I've talked about this. Is probably one of the only teams I've talked about in the offseason. It's the Iowa State Cyclones. I'd say kind of a bold take for them to win the conference, but I mean, I have them as a top 5 team in the country. So it easily could be Houston or Kansas to win this thing. But the Iowa State defense is I think it's a lock to finish top 3 in the country. And they could leapfrog Houston as the best defense in the country. They also have way more offensive upside, as we talked about in the last pod, with the extra shooting that they have, bringing in Nate Heisey from Northern Iowa. And Lipsey's an improved shooter. Gilbert's an improved shooter. And I do think Milan Momcilovic improves in year 2. And the front court offensively is way more talented than it ever has been in the Otzelberger era. So, yeah, I mean, there's a ton of roster continuity here. So this is the team I'm going to go with, and nobody can tell me otherwise anymore.
Yeah, I love the pick. I do think they're going to be a great team this year, and Otzelberger's only improved this team year after year after year, and he's just changed the culture and narrative of Iowa State basketball. Kansas, of course, is definitely the favorite, but Iowa State's going to be right there, as is Houston, as is Baylor, right? I'm pretty high on Baylor. I think they have one of the best coaches in the country. They got Jeremy Roach out of the portal from Duke. Jaden Nunn's back. They got 5-star freshman VJ Edgecombe. They got O'Meara over from Miami. I really like what Scott Drew's done to replace some of those guys they lost last year. They lost quite a bit in Jalen Bridges, Jacoby Walter, Misi, and Ray J. Dennis. So, they've done a really good job. That's a team I wanted to kind of touch on because I just don't think you can discount what Scott Drew does as a coach.
For sure. Yeah, and the defense is going to move in the right direction, I think. They've had 2 very down defensive years where I think they finished like outside the top 75 in KenPom, which is like not like a Scott Drew defense at all. I mean, they lost Jerome Tang to K-State, and they lost their offensive coordinator this offseason to Florida Atlantic and John Jacobs. But I do think these are the best point of attack defenders that they've had. And I think their turnover upside is going to go through the roof. Like Edgecombe's great. I don't think people realize how good he is defensively. He's super athletic, but he's also a fantastic defender. Roach is pretty underrated as well. So I do like Baylor as a flyer. I need to see the defense actually perform back like close to the old Baylor defenses.
Yeah, close to the days of off night Davion Mitchell.
I don't think they get there, but
no.
Yeah. I mean, and even like it's going to be hard to deny Kansas to win this because I mean, how many times have they lost to Allen Fieldhouse in the last 15 years? Like 5 times, maybe.
Like 5 or 6.
I think it's like 4. I don't know if the number's right. I don't have it.
It's not
here,
many.
But if they don't lose at home, like it's going to be really hard for this team to not win it. But Iowa State at Hilton Coliseum has a great home court as well, and I love the defense. It will travel to Allen Fieldhouse, but I don't know if it snags a win from there.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, and then we dive into Player of the Year. I actually have Hunter Dickinson to win the Player of the Year. I mean, he's at the top of the odds board to win the Wooden Award. So he's average. I think he averaged around 18 a game last year. The scoring production is going to have to go up for him to take home this award convincingly. But he is the most talented offensive player in the conference. He's out of the 3-ball these last couple of years, so not much else to say. He's far and away the most talented player.
Yeah, I agree. I think, Kansas is going to be too successful. He's going to have too good of numbers. They're going to ask him to do too much for him probably not to win this award.
And even if Iowa State wins it, even if they win the regular season, like they don't have a player who's going to put up enough numbers to overtake Dickinson. So they could finish 3rd. Kansas could finish 3rd, and Dickinson still takes it home.
Yeah. So while we were just talking about Allen Fieldhouse, I do have it right here in front of me now. So in the Bill Self era, which started in 2003, they've lost 17 games at Allen Fieldhouse. So
wow,
pretty.
I feel like
pretty
it was
impressive.
Your number, like within the last 10 years, they've lost 4 times or something like that.
It is. But in his entire tenure there, since 2003, they've only lost 17 games there. So
yeah, that's less than 1 a year, which is insane.
That's insane.
Yeah,
insane. So Cody, I know you love Iowa State. So with that, your coach of the year, TJ Otzelberger.
Yeah, I mean, no need to go any further with this. Like, he's done a fantastic job with the program since year one. They're continuing to improve. The offense is great. If they win the conference, it's his. I mean, if he goes over Kelvin Sampson and Bill Self to win the conference, it's 100% his award to win.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. Then I'll just dive right into my Big 12 first team. As we said, Dickinson to win Player of the Year. He'll be on first team. LJ Cryer from Houston. Caleb Love from Arizona. I think he's going to put up a ton of numbers. He's going to have to be more efficient, obviously, but he's really one of the only perimeter options they have that's a real threat. Then Taman Lipsey, unbelievable defender for Otzelberger, and Norchad Omier from Baylor.
Nobody from Arizona State. I see you have the Arizona State hat on. So
yeah, I mean, after what I watched the other night against Duke, they lost 103-47 in an exhibition. I actually do like a few of the guys on that team. I'm not going to dive into them too much, but Jaden Quaintance looked pretty good the other day. So
Yeah. Yeah. So moving to the next conference with the Big East, UConn looking to three-peat on the national level, also looking to take home the regular season championship in the Big East again, and that's my pick yet again. And for me, this just really comes down to who they have at the helm. There's obviously a lot of turnover that they had this year with those four guys going to the NBA and Castle, Klingon, Newton, Spencer. But Hurley's such a great coach, as we touched on last time. Don't need to spend a ton of time on it. But they also have a bunch of solid players, good players in Caravan, 5-star McNeely. Diarra is going to do a great job. They also have Samson Johnson, Taurus Reed, right? And then Aiden Mahaney came over from St. Mary's. I just think that with the makeup of this team and with the coach that they have and also the assistant coaches, as you touched on last time, Cody, this team is too good to be defeated in the Big East.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have St. John's written down. I just wanted to be super bold here, but if I had to pick one team, it's going to be UConn. Obviously, I do think St. John's has as good of a chance as anybody to win this. They're going to have the best defense in the conference. They just need to figure out the offense. They need to figure out who's going to space the floor for them. We talked about Wilcher and Dunlap last pod as high upside guys, but it's going to be hard for them to eat into Davon Smith and Kadari Richmond's minutes. Obviously, those two are great playmakers, but the floor spacing needs to be way better in order for them to get there. This is more of like a high upside pick for me for St. John's. If the offense can get to top 4 in the conference, I do think they have a very good chance to win it. And I do think you could see UConn turn into more of that 2023 UConn team that won the title, but they didn't win the conference and they struggled mightily in conference play. I think Marquette ended up winning it that year, and UConn finished like 3rd or 4th in the conference. They struggled in some road games, and they didn't really I don't think they were dealing with many injuries. It was just the Big East was so tough that year, and I do think the Big East is pretty tough. There's depth here. Like there's 5, maybe 6 good teams. I know you love Villanova, so maybe they're a really good team. But overall,
leave them off my list.
Team. Yeah, UConn's the best team, but I will take a flyer and say St. John's. I might have a few dollars on St. John's to win the conference as well.
Yeah. As for player of the year, I think most people probably have this pick. I have Ryan Kalkbrenner at Creighton. He's going to be really good on both ends of the floor. They lost Trey Alexander. They lost Baylor Shireman. They're going to ask him to do even more this year than they did last year. And the key thing with him is he plays well without fouling. So he's going to be on the court a lot. He's going to put up numbers. He's going to block a lot of shots. And they're going to play through him more offensively, I think, this year. And Creighton's still going to be one of the top teams in this conference, right? They have Ashworth, they have Pop Isaacs, they have some other guys that are really, going to make Creighton still a force in this conference. It's just not going to look the same. But Kalkbrenner, I think, is going to be the motor that makes them go, which is why I think he's the best player in this conference for this season and why he's my player of the year.
Yeah, I went Kalkbrenner as well. I mean, I think he's the most valuable defender in the country, and they are going to use him in more post-up situations, and he is going to have some room to operate because they have 4 shooters around him now. I mean, they had I'd say like 3.5 shooters around him before, but they're not going to be able to send double teams. Teams are going to pay the price. I think he could get to 20 points a game this year. But my flyer to win it, I did pick Kalkbrenner, but my flyer to win it is Cam Jones. I think he is going to see a massive usage bump. I think he could lead the country in scoring with how good he is.
I agree.
As a 3-level scorer, he's incredible. And I have a piece written up on the Wooden Award for him to win this thing. But yeah, he's a phenomenal 3-level scorer, and the playmaking's going to have to be there from him with losing Kolek and Iguodaro. So yeah, he would be my flyer.
Yeah, no, I like that pick. I like Cam Jones. I think he's going to be a fun player to watch this season for sure. And then coach of the year for me, I went a little bit different. I took Sean Miller at Xavier. I think that Xavier is going to take a step this year, as we talked about last pod. Obviously, like we said, losing Traore is going to take a hit, but they had a losing record last year. they did play in the NIT, but they were a middle of the pack team in the Big East, went 9-11 in conference. But he did a great job bringing in some guys like Dante Maddox, like Ryan Conwell, Marcus Foster, and then Zach Fremantle's back. And I think that's the key for them. They're going to win more games this year. I could see them easily finishing in the top 3 of this conference, even with the loss of Traore. I could see them finishing around 3, which is why I think Sean Miller is maybe a bold take, but my pick to win this conference.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, there's so many teams in this conference that could finish top 3, like outside of obviously UConn. We all know that they're probably going to be there. And Sean Miller, like, he's never really had a bad defense, regardless of the personnel he's had. So I do think the defense will be competent enough to like firmly in the top 5. I went with Rick Pitino just because I took a flyer on them to win the league. Great defense. Year 2 of Pitino, you've seen it at Iona. They had a bad year 1. Year 2, he had the guys that he wanted, and he had an unbelievable season. So that would be my pick.
That was almost where I went. That was even though I'm not as high on St. John's, I think that they're going to be too much better than they were last year. That's largely in part to what he's done to improve their team from last year to this year. So I did almost go that direction, but I wanted to throw Sean Miller in there because I think Xavier is going to really get back on track this season. And then finally, my Big East first team, I have Alex Caravan at UConn. I think he's just going to be their best player this year on the best team. So then Ryan Kalkbrenner, of course, Cam Jones, as we talked about, Kadari Richmond at St. John's. He's going to be too valuable on both ends as a playmaker. And then I did give Villanova a little bit of credit. I threw Eric Dixon on my first team. He deserves it. He's back for another year, and everything's going to play through him. And if they're any good, it's going to be because of him.
For sure. Yeah, I agree with all 5 of those. That'd be the same 5.
Cool. So moving on from the Big East, headed now to the Mountain West. I know this is a conference that was really exciting last year, but not sure if it's going to be the same this year. A little bit different makeup, but Cody, I'll let you dive in.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be a little bit down. I'm not sure if there's a top 50 team in this league in the country, but it's still my favorite league. I have a soft spot for this league. So my regular season champs, Boise State. I talked about it as a dark horse last episode, and I just think they're going to have the best trio of players in the conference by far in San Jose State transfer Alvaro Cardenas, Tyson Dagenhart, and Omar Stanley up front. And I'm especially high on Cardenas. I think he fills the void that they didn't really have a point guard last year. So I think he's going to bring that poise in the backcourt, and I think he's elite in pick and roll. From all the film that I watched in the offseason on Cardenas, I think he's fantastic. He's a great passer. He can score out of the pick and roll and off the dribble as well. He's going to be great. And they do have high upside shooting options in guys like a redshirt freshman, Chris Lockett, who was a 3-star, I believe, coming out of high school. Andrew Meadow, I believe, was the same. He's a solid shooter, decent defender. And NAIA transfer Javon Buchanan, who looks very ready for the Division I level. He's 6'7" forward, super physical, has a good jumper. He's going to fit in right away. I think he does start right away as well. And then another high upside piece for the defensive end. I'm not sure how much time he gets with Dagenhart and Stanley locking up the front court, but Dylan Anderson from Arizona is a 7-foot shot blocker. Didn't really get a chance at Arizona, and that's why he's here now. And I think that just gives Leon Rice another option. And the floor that Leon Rice gives this team, especially the defense, is super high. While we talk about the offense first, they take care of the ball at a high rate every single year. And especially with Cardenas now, they have that point guard presence that they need. They really didn't have it at all last year. They protect the paint on the defensive end at a solid level, good possessional size that Rice loves. And they're especially elite on the defensive glass, no matter what group they have, no matter how small they were in the front court. And a stat for you, they ranked top 25 in defensive rebound rate in the entire country in 13 of the 14 years of the Rice era. So that just goes to show how much he values that. He also values getting back in transition. So that's going to create a super high floor here, as opposed to teams like New Mexico and San Diego State, who aren't super consistent or aren't going to be super consistent, in my opinion, this year. San Diego State has always been consistent. I just don't love the offense this year. And New Mexico, even with the talent they've had the last few years, they've always failed to reach expectations. And no matter how talented they've been, they've had House, they've had Mashburn, bring in Donovan Dent, and they still couldn't win the league. I think they finished sixth last year with easily the most talented team in the league. I think it could be a similar story, but the only problem I have with Boise would be the lack of depth, and the wing group is still like kind of a question mark, even though I am higher on this group. But I do think the star power of that big three, if you want to call it a big three, I think they'll mask a lot of things that could go wrong there. So the Boise State Broncos are my pick.
Yeah, I also had Boise State as my conference winner, but had New Mexico right behind them. I think I initially started with New Mexico winning it, but ultimately ended up going with Boise State for, the reason they have, two guys that are probably going to finish on the first team in this conference. So I felt like that alone, they just have the best players in the conference, but they do lack some of that depth, as you said.
For sure, guard depth is kind of a concern, like especially ball handling wise. Like Cardenas is going to have to be on the floor for a minimum of 32 to 34 minutes, and he can't get hurt. If they have any injuries or two injuries, I think they can afford one. If they have a second injury to like a major player, they're probably like middle of the pack in the conference, if not a little bit worse. So it's dependent on health for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Now at New Mexico, I know that's where you went for your player of the year, Donovan Dent.
Yeah, I just think he's ready for a true breakout this year after kind of being in the shadow of Jalen House. I do think he took over the last half of the year. Jalen House dealt with some injuries, but Dent took over as the lead guard for a little bit last year, and he's going to see massive improvements numbers wise. I do think his jumper's improved, especially off the dribble. They're going to have to use him a lot more in pick and roll. I think he's being on ball all the time is going to be really good for Donovan Dent. And this team plays at a super fast pace. So I do think you're going to see him get to 17 to 18 points per game. And I do think he can lead the conference in assists. I think he might have led it last year, even with House there. But I do think there's upside for him to even lead the country in assists with the pace that they play at. So I think he's a great player. I think he's going to emerge as a high up draft prospect, honestly, especially if the jumper improves. So I do love Donovan Dent to win the award.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you there. As for coach of the year, goes back to Boise State.
Yeah, I went with Leon Rice for all the reasons I said before. I will watch out for first-year head coach Jared Calhoun at Utah State. I do think he has a really talented roster led by Ian Martinez and Mason Falslev. And then you also brought in Dayton Albury from Queens, who I think is going to be a really good guard right away, especially when he has these other guards to help him out. They also do have pretty solid rim protection. Calhoun hasn't been known to have great defenses. He's more of an offensive-minded coach. But if this offense can be a top three offense, there is upside for this team to get into the top three. And I mean, they won it last year when nobody expected them to do it with Danny Sprinkle. Obviously, they had great Osabor, who's now at Washington, and they had some other great players there. Ian Martinez and Falslev are also there. So, yeah, I mean, I'd take a flyer on Calhoun to possibly be the coach of the year, but I love Boise State, so I'm not going to go away from him.
Yeah, no, I can't blame you there. And then, as I mentioned, likely two first team all conference players, and I know you had both of them in yours. So what'd your first team look like?
Yeah, I went with the two big men from Boise, Dagenhart and Stanley. I went with Donovan Dent, player of the year. I went D-Dan Thomas at UNLV. I think he's due for a breakout as well. And Nate Clifford, who's one of my favorite players in the conference, one of my favorite players in the country. I think he's an elite two-way player. He's going to have to play a bigger role with Stevens gone. So, yeah, I think he could see a bump to 15 points a game this year and be on the first team.
Yeah, no, for sure. I like Clifford. I think the the opportunity is definitely going to be there for him this season. So we're really going to see what he's made of. So final conference we're going to dive into is the Big Ten, everyone's favorite conference. Very deep of average teams, right? And nobody that really stands out as like a true national threat. But for me, it felt like Purdue was the pick as the regular season champ. I know they lost Zach Edey, but they bring back two of the best guards in the conference in Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer. They have one of the best coaches in Matt Painter. The offense is going to look a lot different this year because they're not going to be playing through a 7-5 Zach Edey. They're going to be asking the guards to play a bit more off the dribble and create and get their own shot. So they're not going to be able to benefit as much from guys helping off of them down to Edey and getting open shots. So it's going to require them to be a little bit better. But I do think that they're good enough to do that, and I think that Painter's system and the other players around them, like I'm pretty high on Trey Kaufman-Renn. I think he's a good athlete. He's going to be solid enough for them. He's no Zach Edey. He's no Travion Williams like they had a couple of years ago, but I think that he's going to be good enough where he can give them maybe 8 or 10 points, 6 or 8 rebounds, and be good enough. And then they have Miles Colvin and Caleb First, who are projected to start, right? So I just think that this team, it's really all about their floor. I think their floor is high enough where they're just going to be steady enough where I think that they're the safe pick to win this conference. And I also like Cam Heide coming off the bench. I know he didn't have a great year last year, but I think the potential's there. And they're going to give him the opportunity this year, I think, to do a bit more. So I definitely think that there are other teams that could win this conference. I know last episode I talked about how high I am on UCLA and Oregon, but I have my reserves because of the travel distance and the lack of home court in the regular season. I like them in the tournament setting a lot more. Michigan State I could see being up there, but for right now I think it really is still through Purdue, at least at this point. Now, if one of the guards did happen to go down, I think that would be a different conversation, right? I think some of those other teams may come more into play. I could see a team like Indiana, if they reach their potential with the moves that they made in the offseason and who they have back, I could see them also competing. But for right now, I have the Boilermakers winning the regular season title.
Yeah, I agree. I also have Purdue. I think Matt Painter is the best coach in the conference by quite a bit, honestly. No disrespect to Izzo, but I do think what he's doing over there is getting phased out of the game a little bit. So I do like Matt Painter. I do like Purdue to win this. They have a ton of balance. I think the front court is going to be fine. Like, they still have options. They still have Will Berg and Daniel Jacobson that are going to play a role. I do think Painter still wants his 7'2", 7'3" big man, at least to start the year, to play the 5, and Kaufman-Renn's going to play by his side. But Kaufman-Renn can play the 5, and he does have Travion Williams-like traits. He has super good footwork for his size. He's a great passer. So when he draws double teams, he can still they're still going to make teams pay with double teams because they have so many good shooters. And I am pretty high on the wing group with Colvin and Heide. And then Jakari Harris, the freshman, he's going to play a role here too. They want him to play the Lance Jones role that Lance Jones played last year, but obviously he's not going to get there. Lance Jones was a great defender, but he can get there over time with the development with Painter. And yeah, I mean, Smith and Lawyer is probably the best backcourt in the conference. And I think people need to put a little bit more respect on Braden Smith because I think, he's going to be the top assist man in the country. He's unbelievable in pick and roll. They're gonna be just fine. I mean, I think what happened with like Edey leaving, I think it's being a bit overstated right now. I just think this team had so much talent outside of him. Obviously, he made them look very good, but they're still unbelievable players.
Yeah, and I think that's going to show through, which is why I picked Braden Smith to be my player of the year. there's not a ton of high level talent in this conference, right? There's a bunch of solid players, but that's not discrediting Braden Smith. I think Braden Smith's a great player, and that's really gonna come to the forefront this year, and I think people are gonna recognize that now without Zach Edey there. Braden Smith's gonna run the show, and like you said, he's so good in pick and roll, great passer. He's gonna knock down open shots. He's gonna score the ball for them. He's gonna have to score the ball for them, and I think they're gonna be the best team in this conference. So with all that, I think he has to be the conference player of the year, at least at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, maybe if Umar Ballo could stay on the floor for longer than 23 minutes a game, like maybe he could win the award. I mean, get him to 32, 33. He could average. I mean, he's not getting there. He's not going to get there, but maybe he gets to 20 a game. But Braden Smith is easily my pick for player of the year.
Yeah. And for coach of the year, I went a bit of a different direction. Talked about this team last time, the UCLA Bruins. I took Mick Cronin. I think he's one of the best coaches in this conference, and did a great job recruiting this offseason, retooling that roster like we talked about last time, bringing in guys like Kobe Johnson and Tyler Bilodeau to go along with the guys they have coming back. So I think UCLA, I had them finishing in my top 3 in this conference, and if they do that, I think Mick Cronin has a great shot to win. But at the same time, I think, a bunch of other guys are fully capable of winning this, like Matt Painter. I could see Mike Woodson winning it if Indiana has a top level season. He did a good job in the portal, like I said. I could see if Indiana has a successful season, he could go from hot seat to coach of the year. So who knows?
Yeah, is he more likely to get fired, or is he more likely to win coach of the year?
I'd say the safer pick would probably to say he gets fired, but
that's crazy that it's a safe pick, honestly.
And that's not to be harsh on him, but I just think like winning the coach of the year, there are 18 teams in this conference. Like that's tough, right? Indiana's gonna have to be pretty good. So that's not saying like he's a bad coach, which maybe he is, but I just think it's more about the rest of the coaches in this conference and how many teams there are. Like it's going to be hard to do.
Yeah, I think offensively he's a not so good coach. I think he runs a bit of an outdated offense. I mean, he runs a lot through the post, which like obviously you have to in the Big Ten, like everyone does. I mean, there's elite big men in this conference. You got to play through them, but I just don't think he optimizes the shooting aspect of the game all that much. I don't think he gets shooters open very well. I mean, part of it was last year. The shooting was terrible. Anyway,
horrible shooting.
He's going to have to do it this year. He has weapons this year. He has to utilize them. And if he doesn't do it, like they're going to be in a similar spot to last year.
They are. So my first team, I have Braden Smith, of course. Jackson Shelstad, who we touched on last time, I expect to be one of the most improved and one of the breakout players in the country this year at Oregon. Umar Ballo, who, as you mentioned, could win player of the year, but probably not. Peyton Sanford at Iowa, not super high on Iowa, but I think his numbers, they're going to ask too much of him, and his numbers are going to be too good for you to discredit that. And then I threw freshman Dylan Harper in there from Rutgers. I think if Rutgers is going to be any good, even a middle of the pack team, like those freshmen are going to have to carry the load. And I really like Dylan Harper. So that's why I threw him in there.
Yeah, I think the only one I would throw in is Great Osibor from Washington. Might not be on a great team, but I mean, Danny Sprinkle's been good everywhere he's gone. And Osibor, he's probably going to get the 17, 18 a game. I'm not super high on Sanford making like a huge leap into the 18, 19 point per game kind of guy. But so, yeah, I'll go Osibor as my replacement. Peyton Sanford's obviously right in the mix.
Yeah, for sure. So next thing, Final Four predictions. I know we want to get into this before the season tips off, and now 6 days. So I know we have a couple of the same teams, but I'll let you kick it off with your 4 teams.
Yep, I went Kansas and Duke as my more chalky picks here. And then my last two were Cincinnati and Texas. And I almost threw UConn and Iowa State in there, but it would be the most chalky Final Four ever. I mean, it could happen, but I will take a few flyers in there. As we talked about, Kansas. They have the most balance in the country. They have an elite offense, especially in a tournament setting. They have so many different weapons that they can go to. And DeJuan Harris is a really solid point guard, even though I think he's got some turnover issues, but it's something they're going to work out. They have so many weapons, so I think they're going to be okay. Yeah, we talked about Duke already as well. I think the offense hits its stride midway through the year, and especially Flag being able to operate in a half-court setting. I think they're going to be fine. I went with Cincinnati. I think they have a ton of upside. We talked about Jizzle James last episode. I think year 2 in college hoops, I think he's going to improve tremendously, along with Day Thomas. He was a JUCO guy, even though he's a senior. So this is his second year in Division I. And I love Dan Skillings as well. And they also addressed the shooting issues that they had last year. They brought in Connor Hickman from Bradley. And, you get a healthy CJ Frederick, hopefully. He's been hurt the last 3 years, or at least parts of the last 3 years. And you have Simas Lukosius as well. Came in from Butler 2 years ago. He's a really good piece for them. He's basically everything they want in a connector piece for them. Physical guy. He can shoot the rock as well. And, they have elite physicality at all 5 positions, especially in the front court. You have Dylan Mitchell and probably a top 5 most talented rim protector in the country in Aziz Bandago. He's got to watch foul trouble a little bit because the replacement behind him at the center position isn't great. But this defense is going to be able to defend in a tournament setting as well. They can defend multiple styles, and they're just so physical that they're going to be such a tough out. They're going to play up against good competition. And then the last team I went was A&M. This one, I mean, super flyer here. They addressed the shooting issues, but they finished 340th in the country last year in effective field goal percentage. So what they did, I mean, they added CJ Wilcher from Nebraska, who's an elite shooter, good movement shooter, and he can get hot. You saw it at Nebraska. He got super hot in stretches. And then Manny Obaseki, obviously a guy I'm high on, we talked about. And the defense really improved. So with the additions of Pharrell Payne and Zurich Phelps, you add to the wing group, you add to the rim protection, it's going to make a better defense. And Buzz Williams knows how to coach defense. They're going to force a ton of turnovers. They're also elite on the glass on both ends, especially on the offensive end. So that's going to create upside. In a tournament setting, offensive rebounding and taking care of the ball is huge, and they have both of that. But yeah,
my biggest problem with A&M is it's almost like Wade Taylor thinks that Buzz Williams tells him to go get a tough one every possession.
Fair.
Like
it's very fair.
He loves to chuck it, and which is why his efficiency is very low, right? Like he puts up high points per game, but he shot it in the mid to high 30s for percentages for a couple of years now. So
yeah, I mean they shot it that bad, and they were still. I believe they finished in the 20s in offensive efficiency on KenPom. So like
their offensive rebounding, right, was
they're number one in the country. Like they're relentless on the glass. All you got to do is improve the shooting a little bit. Get to 200 to 250th in effective field goal percentage, and you have a real chance, especially with the improved defense. Defense was more of the problem with this group last year, despite the bad shooting. So I'm a little bit higher on this team than a lot of people are.
Yeah.
And then my championship, I went with Kansas over Duke in the title game.
So for me, I also had Kansas and Duke in my Final Four. Kansas, who I think is the best team in the country, and Duke, who I think has a chance to get there. Obviously super talented, going to have a great defense. It's just going to be a question of whether they get there offensively and the guard play, whether Proctor makes that next step. Knuppel lives up to the hype. I know they have James, who's going to be steady for them. And then Caleb Foster, who seems to be just a bit of a wild card. Who knows what they're going to get out of him. But then I also threw in there Alabama. Bit chalky pick, but I think they go back to the Final Four. They have Mark Sears, again, who I think is the best player in the country. And then I also threw Baylor in there, who might be a bit of a flyer, but for the reasons I talked about earlier, I think Baylor has the potential and such a great coach to get back to this Final Four caliber level. And for me, I also had Kansas winning it, except I had them beating Alabama in the national championship.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. If that Baylor defense is good, like they belong in the Final Four with their offense being so good. The guard plays great, and they're going to offensive rebound the crap out of the Tradomir and Ojan Wuna up front. So I do like this. If I see the defense good early in the year, like I'll completely flip my opinion on this team and say that they're like a top 5 team in the country.
Yeah, for sure. And I have faith in Scott Drew. I mean, he's been there 23 years now,
which is crazy. It doesn't feel like that.
No. I have complete faith in him getting this team with the potential that it has, the talent that they have. I have faith in him getting them to the level that I think they can reach. So, that's it for Final Four, national championship. As for national awards, I know we wanted to mention our national player of the year, and both of us, I think, had the same one.
Yeah, we both had Mark Sears. No need to talk about him anymore. He's the best player in the country for my money. And yeah, I mean, they're going to play super fast pace. He's going to be great.
Yeah. As for first team All-American, I think we had a couple of differences, maybe just one. I had RJ Davis, Mark Sears, Hunter Dickinson, Ryan Kalkbrenner, and Janai Broom. So I think maybe just one difference. I had Kalkbrenner.
I had one. I mean, I'm kind of contradicting here. I did take Kalkbrenner to win Big East Player of the Year, but I also put Cam Jones to be a first team All-American. So Cam Jones is going to have to eat in non-conference in order to get there. But I do think there's upside for him to get to 23, 24 points a game. And if Marquette's a top 4 seed, I think he's got to be a first teamer. So that's just more of a flyer, just a guy I want to mention quite a bit.
Yeah.
Let him get his flowers here.
Yeah, for sure. So as for National Coach of the Year, going to notice a pattern, at least on your side and on my side. Coach, I've talked a lot about. For you, TJ Otzelberger, I don't think you really need to even go into much more detail.
No need to explain. I've talked about him enough.
And for me, Scott Drew at Baylor. I'm just high on this team, and I've talked about him enough. I think he'll do a great job. So our final award that we're going to dish out in our preseason predictions is the top transfer. I know we both have different ones here. So Cody, who was yours?
I went with Kadari Richmond. I also considered a guy like John L. Davis. And, if I wasn't factoring in any team success, I would have taken a guy like Tucker DeVries, who went to West Virginia when his dad took the job, Darian DeVries. And or I would have taken a guy like Robbie Avila at St. Louis, who also followed his coach to St. Louis from Indiana State. But yeah, Kadari Richmond, he's going to put up the numbers, and I think St. John's going to be a great team. We've talked about them a lot. I mean, you should see Richmond get the 16 points, 5 rebounds, 6 assists, and he's a great defender. So
he'll probably average 2+ steals too.
Yeah, honestly, he's a Swiss.
He'll be ready there.
Army knife, and he's not going to have to do like as much playmaking when you have Davon Smith there. But I do think you see Richmond when the game gets into the half court, like he's going to have the ball in his hands, either backing down a smaller guard and making plays for others, or getting downhill and making a play. He's going to be the guy that they need late in contests to steal wins for them.
Yeah, for sure. And the direction I went, best team in the country, as we've talked about, Kansas. I took AJ Storr, transferred over from Wisconsin. I think he's really gonna add to this team and give them a kind of a piece that they didn't necessarily have last year. He's not a great shooter, but I think he's good enough. He's going to shoot it somewhere probably in that mid-30s from 3. But he's really effective getting downhill. I think he's going to be a huge piece for them to complement Dickinson. They got 2 of the better players in the Big 12, and a first team All-American in Dickinson. So that was the direction I went.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to get schemed open by Self And
Yeah.
with the amount of weapons they have, like he's going to have more space on his jumper. I think he only shot like 32% last year, but with the extra space, with the extra time, he's going to get to 35, 36%. I mean, I like a guy like Zeke Mayo. I think he's perfect for Bill Self, but AJ Storr is definitely the more talented guard. So I don't fault you for going with him.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that wraps up our episode for today. A couple of notes on some stuff coming up. Our next episode will be coming out probably on Sunday. This will include some Ken Palm / AP poll reactions, teams that we felt were too high, too low. And we're going to take a deeper dive into some of the freshmen that we've talked about, determining kind of the outlooks that they might have heading into this season. And then we get to talk about the fun stuff. We got games starting next Monday, November 4th. So we'll talk about that full slate and our favorite opening night games. And I know Cody will probably get into some picks for some of those games. But other than that, we're also going to play a game. Not sure if anyone's heard of it. Where'd he transfer? Kind of a spinoff of the Who He Play For that Charles Barkley plays on opening night on TNT. So we're gonna do a spinoff of that in the next episode. So some things to look forward to. But other than that, check out the site mainlyhoops.com for our full breakdowns on each of the Power Conference teams, and then check out some of these articles that we're posting on our socials and on the website as well. So looking forward to the next episode, and see you next time.